Hey, what do you say? We did say this in the previous few videos, but it's finally time to start talking about all the trade rumors, news, and updates for all of your favorite NHL teams that have been eliminated from the playoffs. The Red Wings are indeed one of those teams. They didn't make the dance in the first place. Meanwhile, the Toronto Maple Leafs are on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. You had yourselves the very unfortunate loss to the Tampa Bay Lightning in Game 7, wherein they looked really good, they just could not pull away the victory. Then you had the tragic news afterwards that Mitch Marner ended up getting carjacked at gunpoint, so that's certainly something I did not have on my bingo card. But there are some bigger conversations that you can have about the Leafs and where they go from here. I already made my video talking about how I honestly don't know what that answer is because the team was honestly really good, and I think that if they made the second round, they would have made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. But either way, this is a team that does still need to get over that first-round hump, which is why you have analysts like Jeff Marek and Elliotte Friedman going out there on the radio talking about players that could fit the bill. This is what Jeff Marek said on, I believe it was the Jeff Marek show earlier in the week. Marek talks about how the Leafs need someone in their top six that is tough to play against. The name that popped into his mind is Tyler Bertuzzi. He mentions that 2 seasons ago, the Leafs tried to acquire him at the trade deadline, and Friedman adds that he is a guy that certainly does fit the bill. And so we get into a conversation about Tyler Bertuzzi, one of the more effective scoring forwards on the Red Wings. There are a few reasons why I do think the conversation of Bertuzzi to Toronto makes sense. Firstly, the contract. He's making $4.75 million a year, and that contract goes on till 2022-2023. The last year of this deal could be seen as a really profitable contract if Bertuzzi plays the way that he has been playing. He had 62 points in 68 games played the most recent Red Wings season, and he had 30 goals as well. This is the type of player where if you assume he produces the exact same way if he's on a Toronto Maple Leafs team, that's a point-per-game player for under $5 million a year. And if you're talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs, there is always a conversation to have with the cap space at play. Now, I do acknowledge that we need to bring this up because it also is another aspect of this conversation, although I don't necessarily know the answer to it. Last we had heard Bertuzzi still was not going to get the vaccine, and so I don't know what kind of implications that would have in any form of trade conversations with other Canadian markets because, there's the Arrive Can, the stipulations, heading into Canada, fully vaccinated travelers, etc., etc. It's kind of a mess. So for Tyler Bertuzzi, I don't really know what exactly the limitations or what he would be allowed to do in this circumstance, assuming he is still unvaccinated, but I just thought I'd throw it out there since that is a necessary part to have about this conversation. I just am not really smart enough to understand what's going to happen after that. But either way, Tyler Bertuzzi and the way he plays would sort of be a very nice complement to what it is the Leafs have in their forward core. Obviously, the talent for producing points is there, and that's something the Leafs could, I guess, use a little bit more of. I mean, okay, that's kind of a weird assessment to make, isn't it? They're already so stacked up on forwards. It's never a bad thing to add more forward scoring depth, but it's the physical, feisty, fighting kind of elements that you expect out of guys like Wayne Simmons that Bertuzzi does also bring as well. Sure, he is not the veteran season leader like a Simmons is, but he can drop the gloves and he can stand up for his teammates in somewhat of a similar role. And besides, what Jeff Marek is saying here on the radio is that it's a top 6 forward that is difficult to play against that they need, and not just an extra depth addition like the Wayne train had been the past few years. And so, of course, I do think it's an interesting conversation to have when you talk about the 27-year-old Tyler Bertuzzi and whether or not he could be the answer, quote-unquote, to what the Leafs need. Now, I don't want to make it seem like if you get Tyler Bertuzzi, then all of a sudden the Leafs are making the second round, they're winning the Stanley Cup, they're doing all this and all that. But it is an interesting element that he does add that I do think the Maple Leafs could be lacking in more ways than one. And besides, Bertuzzi was born in Ontario, so there might be somewhat of a hometown connection there. Who really knows? I know his uncle Todd was going all around the NHL. Vancouver, Florida, Detroit, it was all over the place for his career. But for Tyler Bertuzzi, there definitely is a conversation I think you can have that does make sense to me. For the sake of covering all our bases, let's go over the Elite Prospects scouting report they have here on Bertuzzi. A strong up-and-down winger that plays with an abundance of energy and aggressiveness, challenging the opposition to make a move before he does. It won't happen often. Okay, what the heck does that mean? It just says it won't happen often, and then it goes on to the next sentence. Bertuzzi skates with an excellent awareness of position, and his stride is wide to let him cut across lanes at difficult angles to read. His positioning is top-notch, and his offensive skill is undeniable, as he is an adept finisher as well as a creative playmaker. He fights for the puck and is always in pursuit of puck possession on the back check. He is active and always anticipating openings for up-ice transition. His physicality and fearless initiation of contact can create space for teammates, but will also land him in the penalty box. He's a competitor that rarely fails to get the job done in all situations. Because he is a pretty valuable piece, and I know a lot of Red Wings fans love Bertuzzi very much, the question ultimately becomes, what is the price tag for this guy? The Leafs do indeed have their first-round picks in 2022, 2023, and 2024. You might have to think that one of those would be involved in a trade like this, considering the magnitude of a player that Bertuzzi happens to be. I would think there has to be a roster player replacement coming back the other way too, so maybe any one of these cheaper guys that the Maple Leafs have as a forward on their team. In fact, looking at it now, I mean, the only player that is not considered cheap is Alex Kerfoot at $3.5 million. Everybody else is either the big four or under two, so I guess Kyle Dubas did do a good job in building this team the way he has. It's just unfortunate they haven't gotten it done so far. I would think Bertuzzi in a trade package for a first and a roster player could also include some sort of a C, B tier prospect just to make things balanced out a bit more, since the Wings and Yzerman would be parting with their second best point producer this previous season. It is also an interesting point to bring up that the Leafs tried to get Bertuzzi before. 2 years ago, back before Bertuzzi was on his current contract, and admittedly before Bertuzzi was as good as he had been this season. Sure, he had back-to-back near 50-point years in 70 games played, but this season he really did come into his own. Whatever price tag the Maple Leafs were thinking about paying 2 years ago probably should be less than what he's worth today. And so it makes me excited as a tertiary Red Wings fan thinking about the possibilities and seeing where Bertuzzi could end up. Not because I don't like the guy, but because, long term, I mean, Bertuzzi is 27 years old, Raymond, Seider, these guys are in their early 20s. Edvinsson, he is 18, 19 years old. Same thing with Kosa, same thing with the guy they're going to draft this season at the top of the draft. I'm not necessarily saying that Bertuzzi is too old per se to be an effective producer for this team long term. It's just, when he gets another contract next season, he's going to be 28. A lot of the younger guys are going to be transitioning into the Red Wings full-time, and it really makes me interested in seeing, okay, if you trade Bertuzzi now, what could you get in return that helps you out even more by the time Edvinsson, Kosa, Raymond, and all of them are in their primes? To me, Bertuzzi is a lot more of a today kind of player, and he's playing his best hockey today too. This is the type of guy that could help a Maple Leaf squad in the playoffs next year with his already bona fide top 6 play and levels of physicality. So I could totally understand if there was somewhat of an exchange of ideas here between both these teams. It's also really interesting to me seeing what Steve Yzerman would do to Kyle Dubas in a trade because, you know, Steve Yzerman likes to fleece guys, and we've definitely seen a pattern of that over the past few years. Kyle Dubas, are you next? I'm not really too sure. If you're a Red Wings fan, let me know in the comments your thoughts about the idea of trading Tyler Bertuzzi to the Toronto Maple Leafs. What kind of return would you expect? What kind of prospects do you think would be involved in this type of trade? And which ones do you want to see the most? Is this even an idea you want to explore? Screw that. Larkin, Bertuzzi, Raymond is so good. I don't want to break these guys up. Let's just keep Bertuzzi, re-sign him next year, and we'll ride him out into the sunset. Both opinions are definitely valid, so you can let me know in the comments which side you lean on more. But if you are a Maple Leafs fan as well, is this the type of player that you think your team should go after? I know it might be a little bit difficult to immediately start dissecting and analyzing your roster and saying, okay, we need to make trades in this area, we need to get a player like this, but still, let me know in the comments if Tyler Bertuzzi is that guy that you're interested in, and if so, what is the max you would give up in a trade? Is this the all-in, okay, the Kawhi, summer of Kawhi move, I guess? Oh my goodness, I can't believe I just said that, but is this the move that your franchise needs to really cement themselves as a playoff contender and a team that can finally make the second round? Which prospects would you be interested in departing with in a trade for Bertuzzi? Which roster forwards do you think could be a nice replacement as well? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.